My son invited me for Christmas after 3 years of silence. I thought he missed me. I didn't know he wanted me to sign my house away. I was sitting alone when my phone rang. That itself was unusual. When you are old and live alone long enough, your phone becomes decoration. Something you charge out of habit, not expectation. I remember the exact time because I had just finished eating and was still standing near the sink, unsure whether to sit or not. 6:42 p.m. The screen lit up. His name. My son. I stared at it like it might disappear if I looked too long. 3 years. That's how long it had been since he last called me. 3 birthdays. 3 Christmases. 3 winters where my bones hurt more and my world became smaller. He hadn't called when I fell in the bathroom and lay there for hours, too afraid to shout. He hadn't called when I was admitted to the hospital for chest pain that turned out to be loneliness wrapped in fear. He hadn't called when I moved into this smaller apartment and sold the house I raised him in, because it was too big for one quiet woman. And now, he was calling. The phone stopped ringing. I didn't answer the first time. Not because I was angry. Because hope is dangerous when it returns uninvited. Then the phone rang again. I picked it up with both hands. "Hello?" I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted it to. "Mom." Just that. "No, how are you?" "No, I'm sorry." No explanation for the silence. Still, my heart betrayed me. It beat faster. "We're having Christmas dinner," he said. "At my place. You should come." That was it. No warmth. No emotion. Like he was inviting a neighbor. I waited for more words to come. They didn't. For a moment, hope rushed in like it had been waiting outside the door for years. He missed me. Maybe he finally realized. Maybe Christmas did what I couldn't. "I'd like that," I said. My hands were shaking. "Good," he replied. "I'll send you the address." The call ended. Just like that. I stood there for a long time after. The room felt different. Not happier. Unstable. Like furniture had been moved while I wasn't looking. I sat down slowly and pressed my palm against my chest. Christmas, I told myself. My son wants me for Christmas. For a mother, sometimes that sentence alone is enough to forgive years of silence. That night, sleep did not come easily. I kept replaying the call. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I was well enough to travel. Didn't say he missed me. But he invited me. And I let that be enough. I opened my closet and took out my best sweater. The blue one. The one I wore when I wanted to look like I was doing better than I was. I laid it carefully on the bed and smoothed the sleeves. "I'll look nice," I whispered to myself. Just in case. As I prepared for Christmas, memories came back uninvited. I remembered sewing his school clothes late at night. Skipping meals so he could have seconds. Sitting through Christmas mornings pretending not to be tired. I remembered being needed. That memory hurt more than the silence. On the day before Christmas, I packed a small bag. Not because I planned to stay. Because I wanted to belong. I checked the address he sent. A nice place. New. Far from where we used to live. I wondered if there would be a chair for me. I did not know yet that the invitation was not about forgiveness. It was not about family. It was not about Christmas. It was about something he wanted. And something he believed I no longer needed. I spent the night before Christmas awake. Not tossing. Not turning. Just lying there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the building. When you are young, silence feels peaceful. When you are old, it feels like something watching you. I kept thinking about the last time my son and I had spoken properly. It wasn't a fight. That's what hurt the most. There was no shouting. No slammed doors. No cruel words. Just distance. Distance that arrived slowly and stayed forever. He used to call me every day. Even when he had nothing to say. Just checking, he'd tell me. Just wanted to hear your voice. I didn't realize those calls were becoming rarer. Life does that. It removes things quietly so you don't notice the theft. The silence started after his marriage. Not suddenly. Gradually. Calls turned into texts. Texts turned into holidays only. Holidays turned into nothing. I told myself he was busy. I told myself I understood. Mothers are very good at lying to themselves. The first Christmas he didn't come home, I cooked anyway. I set the table for 3. Me, him, and the hope that maybe he'd surprise me. He didn't. I ate alone and packed the leftovers carefully, like I was saving proof that I had tried. The second year, I didn't cook as much. The third year, I didn't cook at all. That was the year he stopped calling completely. People assume children stop calling because parents did something wrong. They ask questions like, "Did you interfere? Were you too strict? Did you say something?" They never ask, "Did you give too much? Did you disappear too quietly? Did you teach them you'd always be okay?" I was okay. Until I wasn't. I remember the day I fell in the bathroom. The floor was cold. The tiles pressed against my cheek. I lay there for hours because my phone was in the other room. I didn't scream. Not because I was strong. Because I didn't want to be a problem. When I finally stood up, my legs shaking, I sat on the edge of the tub and laughed. A short, broken laugh. "That's it," I said out loud. "This is what alone looks like." I still didn't call him. I told myself he had a life. I told myself love meant not demanding. What I didn't understand then was this. Love that never demands becomes invisible. On Christmas Eve, I ironed my sweater slowly. My hands weren't steady. Not from age. From nerves. I hadn't seen him in years. I wondered if he would hug me. I wondered if he would look older. I wondered if I would feel like his mother. Or like someone he used to know. I packed carefully. Too carefully. When you pack with hope, you fold everything like it might be judged. I placed my documents in my bag without thinking. House papers. Old files. They'd been there for years. I didn't know yet how important they would become. That night, I sat on my bed and spoke out loud. "Don't expect too much," I told myself. "Just be grateful you were invited." Grateful. That word again. I slept lightly. Dreamed of him as a boy. Small hands. Missing teeth. Laughing loudly on Christmas morning. I woke up with tears on my pillow. In the morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. Older. Thinner. But still me. "I'm his mother," I whispered. "No one can take that." I didn't know yet how wrong I was. I locked my apartment door behind me and stepped into the cold. Snow had started falling. Soft. quiet. Like everything important in my life. I held my bag tightly and told myself one thing over and over. This is Christmas. This is family. This will be okay. It wasn't. The building stood taller than I expected. Glass. Steel. Clean lines. The kind of place that smells like new paint and distance. I stood outside for a moment, adjusting my scarf, steadying my breath. My reflection stared back at me from the glass doors, smaller than I remembered, like the world had slowly zoomed out without asking my permission. I pressed the buzzer. There was a pause. Then his voice came through the speaker. Yeah. It's me, I said. Mom. Another pause. The door clicked open. He looked different. Older, yes, but also harder. Not tired. Not worn. Just sealed. Hi, he said. No hug. No Merry Christmas. Just hi. I stepped inside, the warmth hitting my face, and for a moment I thought I might cry from the contrast alone. Come in, he said, already turning away. I followed. The apartment was beautiful. Everything matched. Everything had a place. Nothing looked lived in. A tall Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated perfectly. Not lovingly. Precisely. Ornaments evenly spaced. Lights wrapped just right. It didn't look like a tree someone argued over. It looked like a tree someone paid for. People were already there. I didn't recognize most of them. A woman laughed loudly near the kitchen. A man leaned against the counter holding a drink. Children I didn't know ran past me without slowing down. No one introduced me. I stood there holding my bag like it was the only proof I belonged. Oh, this is my mom, my son said finally, gesturing vaguely in my direction. No name. Just my mom. A few people nodded. Someone smiled politely. Then the conversation continued without me. I moved toward the couch and sat down carefully, smoothing my sweater. I told myself to observe. To listen. To adjust. That's what I'd always done. His wife appeared from the kitchen. She looked at me, then smiled, thin, controlled. Merry Christmas, she said. Merry Christmas, I replied. She looked at my bag. You didn't need to bring anything. I didn't, I said quickly. It's just my things. Oh, she replied. Right. She turned away. I watched her move through the room like she owned it. Which, of course, she did. She directed people. Adjusted plates. Moved chairs. Everything flowed around her. I was the only thing out of place. When it was time to eat, everyone gathered around the table. It was large. Polished. Beautiful. Too many plates. Too many glasses. Not enough space. I stood behind a chair, waiting. Waiting for someone to say, "Oh, here, Mom can sit here." No one did. Someone pulled a chair closer to themselves. Someone else squeezed in. The table filled. I was still standing. Oh, my son said suddenly, noticing. Mom, we didn't count you. I'm sorry. Count. Like a number. Like a mistake. It's fine, I said quickly. Too quickly. I'm not very hungry. That was a lie. But lies like that are easier than standing there asking for a place. I carried my plate to the kitchen and stood by the counter. The noise behind me grew louder. Laughter. Clinking glasses. Someone raised a toast. To family, they said. I swallowed. I ate quietly. Every bite tasted like something I had already lost. I remembered Christmases past. My table. My cooking. My hands moving constantly so no one else had to. Now, I was the one standing. From the table, I heard his wife say something that made my stomach tighten. She doesn't eat much anyway. She didn't say it unkindly. That made it worse. After dinner, gifts were exchanged. Boxes passed around. Wrapping paper torn open. Excited voices. Someone handed me a small envelope. Inside was a gift card. No card. No message. Just plastic. Thought you might need it, my son said. Need. Not want. Not enjoy. Need. I thanked him. Of course I did. At one point, he pulled out some papers from a folder. Actually, Mom, he said, tapping the stack lightly, there's something we should talk about while you're here. The room quieted just a little. Not enough for everyone to hear. Enough for me to feel it. I looked at the papers. White. Neat. Official. My name typed at the top. My heart slowed. Not raced. Slowed. We'll talk later, he added quickly, glancing around. After dessert. Dessert. Always later. Always postponed. I nodded. Because nodding had become my language. But inside me, something had shifted. A weight. A warning. That night, I lay awake in the guest room. The bed was too soft. The walls unfamiliar. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the table. The missing chair. The papers. And for the first time, a thought crept in that scared me more than loneliness. What if I wasn't invited because I was loved? But because I was needed? I woke up before anyone else. That has always been my habit. Even when there was no one left to wake up for. The guest room felt cold, unfamiliar. The blanket smelled like detergent I didn't recognize. I lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of a house that wasn't mine, and tried to steady myself. Something was coming. I didn't know what yet. But I could feel it. I dressed slowly. I chose the same blue sweater. I wanted to feel like myself. In the mirror, my face looked tired. Not from sleep, but from waiting. Waiting always leaves marks. Whatever happens, I whispered to my reflection. Stay calm. That was the promise I made to myself. In the kitchen, his wife was already awake. She didn't smile. Coffee? She asked. Yes, thank you. She poured it and slid the cup toward me without looking up. We stood there in silence. Finally, she spoke. He told you about the papers, right? My fingers tightened around the cup. No, I said. He just said we'd talk. She nodded, as if that settled something. Well, it's better to be clear. Clear. That word again. When my son came into the kitchen, he looked surprised to see us both there. Oh, he said. You're up. Yes, I replied. I couldn't sleep. He hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. The same one from the night before. He placed it on the table. Between us. Mom, he began, sitting down, this isn't a big deal. We just need to update a few things. Update. Another gentle word. Inside the folder were documents. Official ones. I recognized the layout immediately. Property papers. My name was printed neatly at the top. So, what is this? I asked, even though my chest already knew. He cleared his throat. Well, he said, you're not really using the house anymore. The words landed softly. Too softly. I sold the house 3 years ago, I replied. When I moved. Yes, he said quickly. But you still have the other property. The one your sister left you. My sister. Gone. Another loss folded neatly into paperwork. You don't need it, he continued. And we could really use it. There it was. Not concern. Not care. Use. His wife leaned against the counter, arms crossed. It's just practical, she said. You're getting older. Managing property is stressful. Stressful. I thought of the years I worked 2 jobs. Of raising him alone when his father died. Of managing everything without ever calling it stress. I manage just fine, I said quietly. My son sighed. Mom, please don't make this difficult. Difficult. That word again. He slid the papers closer to me. We're not taking anything, he said. We just want things in order. In order for whom? I asked. For us, he replied. Honest, at least. I picked up the papers and read them carefully. Every word felt heavy. Permanent. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't help. This was removal. I want you to sign today, he said. Today. On Christmas. I looked up at him. Why today? He shrugged. You're already here. Already here. As if my presence was an opportunity. Something inside me went very still. Not broken. Still. I need time, I said. He shook his head. There's no need. This is the best solution. The best solution for whom? His wife stepped forward. You don't need all this anymore, she said calmly. You have us. Us. I looked at her. Then at him. Then at the papers again. And suddenly, I understood everything. The call. The invitation. The missing chair. None of it was accidental. I raised you, I said quietly. I fed you. Protected you. Loved you. I know, he replied. And we're grateful. Grateful. But not enough to wait. My hands trembled. Not from age. From the clarity. This wasn't about my future. It was about theirs. And I was in the way. I closed the folder slowly. I won't sign this today, I said. The room changed. The air tightened. For the first time since I arrived, silence felt sharp. My son leaned back, frustration flashing across his face. Mom, he said, lowering his voice. You don't really have a choice. That sentence ended something forever. After he said it. You don't really have a choice. Something inside me finally stopped arguing. Not because I agreed. Because I understood. There are moments when words become useless. This was one of them. I looked at my son across the table and tried to remember when his face last looked like mine. When his eyes still searched for approval instead of outcomes. I couldn't find it. I need some air, I said. My voice surprised even me. Steady. Calm. His wife looked relieved. Of course, she said quickly. Take your time. Time. They always offer time after taking everything else. I stepped out onto the balcony. Cold air hit my face hard enough to wake every memory in my body. Below me, the city moved like it always had, people going somewhere, carrying bags, living lives that did not include this moment. I gripped the railing and breathed. Slowly. I thought of my sister. How she had trusted me with everything. How she had said, "You'll know what to do." I thought of my husband. How he used to say, "If someone rushes you, it's because they're afraid you'll think." And suddenly, everything made sense. Behind me, through the glass door, I could see them talking. My son gesturing. His wife nodding. Planning. Not worrying. I realized something painful and freeing at the same time. They were not afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing what I owned. When I went back inside, they both looked up. So, my son asked, "Are you ready?" Ready. That word again. I sat down slowly. "I'm tired," I said. His wife smiled. "Of course you are." "I'll sign after Christmas," I continued. "Not today." My son's jaw tightened. "There's really no reason to wait." "There is," I replied. "I want to understand what I'm giving away." He exhaled sharply. "Mom, it's just paperwork." Just paperwork. That's what people call your life when they want it neatly transferred. I nodded. "Then it can wait." Silence followed. Not comfortable silence. Heavy silence. I could feel it then, the shift. They were no longer speaking to a mother. They were negotiating with a problem. His wife crossed her arms. "We're just trying to help you." I looked at her. "Helping doesn't feel like pressure," I said quietly. She looked away. No one spoke after that. They gathered the papers back into the folder. Dessert was cancelled. The room felt smaller. That night, I packed my bag slowly. Not angrily. Deliberately. Each item folded felt like a decision. I wasn't running. I was preparing. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my phone. I didn't call my son. I called the number I had saved but never used. The lawyer my sister trusted. "Hello," a calm voice answered. "My name is Margaret," I said. "I need to ask you something." After the call ended, I felt lighter. Not relieved. Prepared. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. The guest room no longer felt temporary. It felt like a crossing between who I had been and who I was about to become. Down the hall, I heard my son laughing softly. Life continuing. Without concern. And for the first time, that didn't break me. It clarified me. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself. They taught me not to speak. I will teach myself not to rush. I slept better than I expected. That surprised me. I thought anger would keep me awake. Or fear. But what kept me calm was something else. Clarity. In the morning, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that means people are being careful around you. I dressed slowly and packed the last of my things. Not everything. Just what mattered. The rest could wait. When I entered the kitchen, my son was already there. He looked tired. Not worried. Annoyed. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I replied. His wife joined us moments later, her expression polite and distant. No one mentioned the papers. No one mentioned Christmas. It was as if the tension had been wrapped and placed back on a shelf. Temporary. "I'll be heading out today," I said, pouring myself tea. My son looked up. "So soon?" "Yes." He hesitated. "You don't have to rush." I almost smiled. "I won't," I said. "I don't rush anymore." Something in my tone made him look at me more closely. But he didn't ask. They left shortly after. "Errands," they said. I was alone in the apartment. Truly alone. And for the first time since arriving, I felt no pressure. I sat at the table and opened my bag. Inside was a thin folder. The one they hadn't asked about. The one they assumed didn't matter. Years ago, after my sister passed, I had done something unusual. Something practical. Something quiet. I had transferred the property she left me into a trust. Not because I distrusted my son. Because my sister had asked me to. "Promise me you'll protect yourself," she'd said. I had. The house. The land. All of it. Not mine to sign away. Not anymore. I hadn't thought about it when my son called. I hadn't planned this moment. But sometimes, the past prepares you for battles you don't know are coming. When they returned later that afternoon, they brought the folder again. My son placed it on the table, trying to sound casual. "So, have you thought about it?" I nodded. "Yes." His wife leaned forward slightly. "And?" "I spoke to my lawyer this morning," I said. The word lawyer changed the air instantly. My son frowned. "You did what?" I asked questions, I replied calmly. "The kind you told me I didn't need to ask." Silence. "I can't sign these papers," I continued. "Not because I don't want to help. But because I can't." His wife's face tightened. "What do you mean you can't?" I folded my hands. "The property you're asking for is held in trust." They both froze. "What trust?" my son asked. "My sister's trust," I said. "She set it up before she passed." I followed her instructions. His wife looked at him. He looked back at her. The plan was unraveling. Quietly. "So you're saying," my son began. "I'm saying," I interrupted gently, "that there is nothing for me to sign." The silence that followed was different from before. Not tense. Exposed. His wife spoke first. "You should have told us." I met her eyes. "You didn't ask." My son leaned back in his chair. For the first time since I arrived, he looked uncertain. Not angry. Small. "That doesn't change anything," he said finally. "We can still figure something out." I nodded. "Yes," I said. "You can." I stood up. "I'm leaving now." "What?" he asked. "Why?" "Because Christmas is over," I replied. "And so is this conversation." They didn't stop me. They didn't apologize. They didn't argue. They watched. As I closed the door behind me, I felt something unfamiliar in my chest. Not triumph. Not revenge. Relief. For the first time in years, I was no longer being pulled forward by guilt. I was walking under my own weight. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. Not because of the time. Because of the weight. I stood there alone, my reflection staring back at me from the metal walls. An old woman holding a small bag. Calm on the outside. Rearranged on the inside. When the doors opened, I stepped out without looking back. I didn't need to. Outside, the air was sharp. Cold enough to remind me that I was still alive. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, unsure where to go next. Not lost, just unhurried. That was new for me. For most of my life, I had moved according to other people's schedules. School times. Meal times. Appointments. Needs. Now, time belonged to me again. I took a taxi. The driver didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. As the city moved past the window, my phone vibrated in my hand. Once. Then again. I didn't look. Not yet. I thought of the apartment I had left behind. The perfect tree. The clean table. The empty chair. I realized something important. They had never planned for me to stay. Only to sign. That truth no longer hurt. It explained everything. The taxi stopped outside my small apartment. The one I had moved into years ago when the house became too much for one person. It wasn't beautiful. But it was mine. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The quiet welcomed me. I set my bag down and sat in a chair by the window. Only then did I check my phone. 3 missed calls. All from my son. One message. Mom, we need to talk. Need. Not want. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. That night, I made soup. Nothing fancy. Just warm. I ate slowly, listening to the sound of my own breathing. It felt like returning to myself after being away too long. Sleep came easily. No ceiling fan unfamiliar. No footsteps in the hall. Just silence that belonged to me. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Yes. I said. Where did you go? My son asked. I came home, I replied. There was a pause. You left without saying goodbye. I smiled faintly. I said everything I needed to, I said. He sighed. This didn't have to be like this. No, I agreed. It didn't. Another pause. Why didn't you tell us about the trust? He asked. I leaned back in my chair. Why didn't you tell me why you invited me? I asked. Silence. I didn't raise you to rush people, I continued gently. And I didn't raise you to corner them. His voice softened. We were just trying to plan for the future. So was I replied. After we hung up, I felt tired. Not drained. Finished. Some conversations end not because they are resolved, but because they have revealed enough. Days passed. Slow ones. My son called less. When he did, his voice was different. Careful. He was no longer in control of the conversation. And that unsettled him. One afternoon, I met my lawyer in person. We reviewed everything. Everything was secure. Nothing could be taken without my consent. That knowledge gave me something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Christmas decorations came down across the city. Lights disappeared. Trees were dragged to the curb. Life moved on. So did I. One evening, my son sent another message. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied. Intent doesn't erase impact. He didn't respond. I realized something then. Sometimes, people don't change when you explain. They change when access changes. I was no longer available for pressure. Or guilt. Or urgency disguised as love. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. Anger would have meant I was still holding on. I wasn't. That night, I sat by the window and watched the city lights. I thought of my sister. Of my husband. Of the woman I used to be, the one who apologized for breathing. She would be proud, I whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. After Christmas, the world went back to normal. At least, that's what people say. But for me, nothing returned to what it was before. It didn't need to. The days became simple. I woke up when my body told me to. I ate when I was hungry. I rested without explaining myself. No one questioned my choices. No one rushed me. That freedom felt unfamiliar at first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. My son called once a week after that. Sometimes twice. The conversations were short. Careful. He asked how I was. I answered honestly. I'm okay. Not fine. Not managing. Okay. That seemed to confuse him. One afternoon, he said, "You sound different." I smiled. I am. He didn't ask how. Some questions scare people more than answers. I stopped replaying the Christmas dinner in my mind. Stopped wondering if I should have said something differently. Clarity has a way of closing doors gently. Once you see the truth, imagination loses its power. I began sorting through old things. Not because I wanted to forget. Because I wanted to choose what stayed with me. Photographs. Letters. Receipts of a life fully lived. I kept what mattered. Let the rest go. One morning, I found an old picture of my son as a child. He was smiling, missing 2 teeth, holding a Christmas ornament he had made at school. I didn't cry. I whispered, "I loved you well." And that was enough. Weeks passed. Then months. The distance didn't grow. It settled. Like a boundary finally respected. My son invited me to lunch once. Not on a holiday. Not with an agenda. Just lunch. I considered it. Then I said no. Not out of punishment. Out of honesty. I'm not ready, I told him. He accepted it quietly. That mattered. I realized something important. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from no longer needing to. I joined a small group at the community center. Nothing dramatic. Just people. Some older than me. Some younger. All carrying stories they no longer needed to prove. I listened. I laughed. I spoke when I wanted to. At night, I slept deeply. No rehearsed conversations. No imagined outcomes. Just rest. One evening, as I made tea, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked lighter. Not younger. Lighter. I had put something down. I thought about all the years I confused love with endurance. How often I stayed quiet to keep others comfortable. How much space I gave away without realizing it was finite. Now, space had found me again. Inside. My son sent a message one night. I hope you know I still love you. I read it slowly. Then replied. I know. I just love myself now too. He didn't respond. But I didn't need him to. For the first time in a long while, my life felt complete without applause. Without validation. Without explanation. Distance hadn't broken us. It had clarified us. And clarity, I learned, is a form of kindness. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. Not by erasing them, but by teaching you where not to touch anymore. After the distance settled between my son and me, I stopped waiting for things to change. That waiting had been a quiet job I didn't know I was doing every day. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for understanding. Waiting for him to suddenly remember who I was to him. When I stopped waiting, my days grew longer. Not emptier. Longer. I began noticing small things again. The way sunlight moved across the wall in the afternoon. The sound my kettle made just before it boiled. The rhythm of my own footsteps when I walked to the market. For years, my attention had been stretched thin across other people's needs. Now, it returned to me. Some evenings, loneliness visited. Not like before. Not desperate or loud. More like a quiet guest who stayed briefly and then left. I learned to sit with it. Loneliness loses its power when you stop fighting it. I thought often about the woman I used to be. The one who believed love meant never saying no. The one who thought silence was kindness. The one who confused sacrifice with duty. I didn't blame her. She did what she knew how to do. She loved the only way she was taught. One afternoon, while organizing old papers, I found a notebook. Inside were lists. Groceries. School supplies. Doctor appointments. A life written in responsibility. No dreams. No wants. Just tasks. I closed the notebook gently. I see you now, I whispered to the woman who wrote it. My son called less frequently. When he did, our conversations were polite. Careful. We spoke about the weather. About work. About nothing important. I noticed he no longer tried to rush me. That change mattered. It told me something had landed. Once, he asked quietly, "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. Not because it was asked. Because it was the first honest one he'd asked in years. Yes, I said. There was silence on the line. I didn't think you would be, he admitted. I smiled. Neither did I said. Happiness, I learned, does not always look joyful. Sometimes it looks like calm. Like knowing where you stand. Like not having to defend your existence. I started volunteering twice a week. Nothing heavy. Just helping where I could. People thanked me. Not because they owed me. Because they saw me. That felt new. One morning, I woke up from a dream about my husband. He was standing in our old kitchen, sleeves rolled up, smiling the way he used to when he wanted to say something kind but didn't want to make a fuss. You did good, he said. I woke up with tears on my face. Not sad ones. Proud ones. I realized then that closure does not always come from conversation. Sometimes it comes from understanding. From seeing the full picture without defending your place in it. As months passed, I stopped telling my story in my head. I didn't need to rehearse it anymore. The story had already ended. The lesson stayed. I thought of Christmas again. Not the pain. But the moment I stood up from the table. The moment I didn't beg for a chair. That moment changed everything. I wasn't angry with my son. Anger would have meant I still needed him to be different. I didn't. I was grateful. Not for what happened, but for what it showed me. It showed me that love without boundaries becomes a habit. And habits can be broken. I wrote one sentence on a piece of paper and placed it by my bed. I am allowed to take up space. I read it every morning. Not because I forgot. Because I was still learning. There is a strange moment that comes after everything is finished. Not when it ends. But when you realize it has already ended. And you are still standing. That was how the last chapter of my life began. Quietly. I stopped marking time by holidays. Christmas passed without ceremony. New Year's arrived without promises. Days became days again. Not reminders. In the beginning, I thought peace would feel bigger. Louder. Like relief. But peace, I learned, feels more like balance. Like your feet finally touching the ground after years of leaning. I woke up one morning and realized I had not thought about the papers. Not about the house. Not about the table. Not about the chair that wasn't saved for me. The memory had softened. Not faded, softened. That mattered. I made tea and sat by the window. The city moved as it always had. People hurrying. Cars stopping. Life continuing. And for the first time in a very long time, I was not behind it. I was part of it. I thought about motherhood. Not the romantic version people like to talk about. The real one. The kind where you slowly give pieces of yourself away and call it love. The kind where you tell yourself you don't need anything back. Until one day, you realize you gave so much that people forgot you were a person too. I don't blame my son for that. I taught him. I taught him that I would always bend. That I would always understand. That I would always be okay. Children believe what we demonstrate. And I demonstrated disappearance. That realization hurt. But it also freed me. Because it meant I could teach myself something new. I began practicing saying no. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly. No, thank you. No, that doesn't work for me. No, I need rest. Each time I said it, my heart raced. Years of conditioning don't disappear easily. But the world did not collapse. No one shouted. No one left. The fear had been larger than the truth. I started filling my days intentionally. Not with productivity. With presence. I took longer walks. I sat in parks without checking the time. I spoke to strangers without explaining myself. People listened. That surprised me. One afternoon, I helped a woman pick up groceries she dropped on the sidewalk. She smiled at me and said, "Thank you, ma'am." Not poor thing. Not old lady. Just, thank you. I carried that home with me like a gift. At night, I wrote. Not stories. Not journals. Letters I never sent. To my son. To my sister. To the woman I used to be. I didn't accuse. I explained. And when I was done, I didn't mail them. I didn't need to. The writing itself was the release. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. That question leads nowhere. It assumes responsibility for someone else's choices. I had already carried enough. My son called one evening. His voice was hesitant. "I was thinking about what you said," he told me. I listened. "I didn't realize how much pressure we put on you." We. Not just him. That mattered. "I know," I said. There was silence. Not awkward. Respectful. "I'm trying to do better," he said. I believed him. But belief no longer meant access. "Good," I replied. "For yourself." After the call ended, I felt no rush to celebrate. No relief. Just acknowledgement. Growth doesn't always come with reunion. Sometimes it comes with distance held gently. I realized then that I did not lose my son. I lost an old version of myself. The one who believed love meant endurance without limit. The one who believed silence was kindness. The one who thought taking up space was selfish. That woman kept me alive. But she could not take me further. I placed my hand over my heart and felt it beat steadily. Still strong. Still willing. Still mine. As the weeks passed, I noticed something subtle but important. My body felt lighter. Not younger. Not stronger. Lighter. As if I had been carrying a weight for so long that I forgot it wasn't part of me. I used to wake up with a tightness in my chest. A quiet worry that hummed beneath everything I did. Had I said the wrong thing? Had I waited too long? Had I failed as a mother? That hum was gone. In its place was something calmer. Acceptance. I stopped rewriting the past in my head. Stopped imagining conversations where I said the perfect thing. Stopped wishing for different outcomes. The past had already given me its lesson. Repeating it would not deepen my understanding. One morning, while cleaning the kitchen, I caught myself humming. A small sound. Barely there. But it stopped me. I hadn't hummed in years. Not since my husband died. Not since life became something to manage instead of feel. I sat down at the table and let the sound come and go. It reminded me of my mother. How she hummed while folding clothes. How she never explained herself, yet somehow taught me everything. She had lived a quiet life too. But she never disappeared inside it. I had. I thought about how easily women like us are praised for endurance. She's so strong. She never complains. She handles everything. No one ever asks what it costs. I had paid that cost for decades. In energy. In voice. In space. And now, finally, the bill was closed. I went back to the community center more often. Not to be useful. To be present. I joined conversations instead of observing them. I laughed when something was funny. I excused myself when I was tired. People adjusted. The world did not break. One afternoon, a young woman sat beside me and asked, "How do you stay so calm?" I thought about it. Then answered honestly. I stopped trying to be needed. She nodded, like she understood more than she expected to. At home, I rearranged the furniture. Moved the chair closer to the window. Placed a small plant on the sill. It wasn't decoration. It was declaration. This space was lived in. By me. I stopped minimizing myself in conversations. Stopped saying it's nothing when something mattered. Stopped apologizing for taking time. These changes were small, but they were loud inside me. One evening, my son called again. His voice sounded softer than before. Not careful. Open. "I've been thinking about how I talked to you," he said. "And how often I didn't listen." I didn't rush to reassure him. That old habit had died. "I hear you," I said. And I meant both things. He paused. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were." I smiled. "Neither do I." That was not rejection. That was reality. After the call, I sat quietly. I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean reopening doors. It means removing bitterness from the lock. I had forgiven him. Not because he asked. Because I no longer needed the anger to protect me. I thought of the house again. Not with loss. With distance. It was never the house that mattered. It was the way I had given myself away inside it. I wrote another sentence in my notebook. Love without boundaries teaches people how to leave. I closed the book. Lesson learned. As spring approached, the city softened. Trees budded. Light stayed longer. Life hinted forward. So did I. I began planning small things. A short trip. A class I'd always wanted to take. Nothing urgent. Just possible. Possibility is a powerful thing when you think you've reached the end. One night, I dreamed of my younger self. She was standing in a kitchen, tired, smiling anyway. I walked up to her and placed my hand on her shoulder. "You can rest now," I said. She nodded. And disappeared. I woke up crying. Not from sadness. From relief. There is a quiet kind of strength that comes when you stop asking life to explain itself. I didn't need answers anymore. I had lived them. One morning, as I walked through the park, I watched an elderly man sit alone on a bench feeding birds. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who had learned not to rush joy. I sat a little distance away and watched too. No phones. No hurry. No purpose beyond being there. And I realized something simple and powerful. I had finally arrived at my own life. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant staying available at all costs. That love meant endless patience. That sacrifice meant silence. That aging meant stepping aside. I was wrong. Love is not measured by how much of yourself you erase. And aging is not a retreat. It is a return. I returned to myself piece by piece. In the way I spoke. In the way I rested. In the way I chose what deserved my energy. I stopped explaining my choices. People who respect you don't need explanations. My son and I speak now. Not often. But honestly. He no longer asks for urgency. I no longer offer rescue. We meet each other where we are, not where we wish the past had stayed. That is the only place real relationships survive. One evening, he asked me something quietly. "Do you regret it? Leaving like that?" I thought carefully before answering. "No," I said. "I regret staying silent for so long." He didn't argue. That mattered. I don't know what the future holds. I don't pretend to. But I know this. I will never again sit at a table where my place is uncertain. I will never again shrink so someone else can feel larger. I will never again confuse endurance with love. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Christmas. But not with pain. With clarity. That day did not break me. It returned me to myself. If you are listening to this and you feel forgotten, if you are aging and being told you don't need much, if you are quiet because you think that is kindness, please hear this from someone who learned it late but learned it fully. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose peace over approval. Even now. Especially now. I did not lose my son. I lost the fear that kept me small. And in that loss, I found something better. Myself.